Hey, what's up, guys? Halsey Schider with the Helicopter Podcast, and I am coming at you fast and hard here with another fun episode of the Helicopter Podcast. Of course, let's get through our formalities here. Big shout out to our friends over at MHM Publishing for creating the Vertical HeliCASTS platform. It's brought to you by them, so thank you guys so much. Obviously, that's Vertical Magazine, Valor, Skies, such an incredible company, and essentially now you're one-stop shop for everything aviation media, whether it's print, podcasts, or now even on YouTube. So make sure that you're following all pages, and please make sure that you're following me at Heli Halsey. I love connecting with you guys on social media, and it's because of you guys that I get to have these super cool conversations. I've said this probably in 5 or 10 podcasts, but today's guest is falling into that. I had heard of this individual since I started flying helicopters. So when I was 18, 19 years old, I remember people would come back from the safety course and they would talk about this guy, Simon, that they would be flying with. And things that they would tell me are, I couldn't really auto-rotate until I flew with Simon, or I didn't really fully understand this or that until I flew with Simon, or it was like, you have to go and fly with Simon. And I remember I heard this name, and then I've continued to hear it over the years. Admittedly, Simon, when I was like 18, 19, and probably could have come and flown with you, I was poor. And so I had like literally just enough money from my student loan to get me through the flight school. So I couldn't do any extracurricular. So it actually wasn't until last year that not only did I get to finally fly with Simon for the first time, but I actually met Simon for the first time, even though I've been hearing about this guy for nearly 20 years. So I couldn't be more elated to welcome Simon Jones from Advanced Flight to the Helicopter Podcast. Simon, how are you, bud?
I'm doing good. Thanks for the intro. That was pretty
just
cool.
So true. It's happened before. I've had the opportunity of maybe 5 or 10 guests in the past where I've heard about them. They were like just always there. It's like you take a right, it's Simon Jones. You take a left, it's Simon Jones. You're just always hearing this name, and you're definitely one of those guys for me. And in fact, when I became a flight instructor back in the day, I remember I would tell people, hey, look, if you're going to the safety course, I think this guy books out super quick. But if you can try to get with this Simon guy, he's really helped some of my students in the past with auto rotations. I was like, I haven't flown with him, but I hear it's a pretty neat experience. So finally last year, of course, I was attending the safety course and we got to fly together. I got to say, you didn't see me in my best form, Simon. I hadn't flown a helicopter for like 6 months, let alone a Robinson for a hot minute. So it wasn't my best show. I was definitely a little tense on it, but nonetheless, I had a great time. And I definitely felt like I really knocked off a lot of that rust and just was a fun flight and just fun to fly with you. But, one thing I'm not super familiar with, Simon, is Advanced Flight, actually. I'm not super familiar with the company that you started. Now that you're still there, I don't think you own it anymore, but yeah, just talk to me a little bit about that, and let's just see where this conversation goes.
So basically, back in 2005, I'd been working for another company, flying a 44. The other person involved with that company wanted to get out. There's a whole background story we can get into later on that if you'd like, but I realized at that point there was a gap in the market. We were just starting to get into advanced instruction, enhanced auto rotation training, things that most regular flight schools wouldn't touch. And so seeing that there was that gap in the market, I thought this would be an ideal opportunity, especially as I was based at Torrance with that company. to set up advanced flight right here at Torrance, just down the road from the factory, so that I could not only get students that wanted to come in specifically for advanced flight, but also anybody that was coming in for the safety course. I was already working for the safety course at this time as a contract instructor, and we were constantly getting people saying, this is really good training, can we get more? And so that was the purpose of setting up advanced flight. Come to the factory, do an hour with the safety course, see how we did things at the factory. Want to get more, just literally come down the road to advanced flight, jump in another 44 and go and do the exact same thing, but in more detail with more time to expand on it. As you know, the safety course flight is quite short. You only get an hour. We throw a lot of stuff at you in that hour. So it's just a good opportunity to get a little bit more beyond that.
Yeah, no, I remember my students, going down, and essentially, yeah, it's like it was a supplement to the safety course. It was like they go to the course, they do the flight, and then they would go and fly with you. Now, was it always your ambition to learn how to fly and then kind of stick within the training world and specifically with Robinson helicopters? How did that kind of naturally happen? Because albeit you're an incredible, and I would say maybe a one-of-a-kind instructor that we have globally. I really feel that way, especially after getting to fly with you. But I know that a lot of guys, even myself included, we went to flight school and we want to be an air medical pilot, or we want to fly corporate VIP.
Yeah.
And it was always about like the next bigger helicopter, the next thing. And now you've been within this Robinson training world and really become an expert in it over however many years. Was that the plan, or did it just kind of happen that way?
No, definitely wasn't the plan. As a kid growing up, I was born and raised in the northwest of England, just outside of Manchester, one of the big cities up in the northwest there. And I remember seeing a picture of a Medivac helicopter. It was in the UK. I forget what type it was, but it was landing right in the middle of an intersection. I remember looking at that thinking how cool that was. And so for the start of my career, getting into helicopters, I always thought I'd end up going down that road. I always thought I'd end up coming to the US, getting my licenses, going back to the UK, converting, and then ended up doing something like EMS or police contracts or something along those lines. I never really planned on being a full-time instructor. It was just something that as I went on, again, didn't plan on staying in the States, and just started getting offered jobs, started seeing interest from people for what I was doing. And so it just kind of went that way naturally without it being forced or without me even trying to go in that direction. So definitely was not a plan to be a career instructor. It just happened.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That way.
I producer Zach, who you know as well, we've always talked about it. Like, if I could have created a path of financial viability, which I believe you probably have done, and just been a flight instructor, could have just continued to be a flight instructor for my entire career, I think I might have actually gone that path. Because for me, what I try to tell people all the time is like, sure, air medical has its thing, or corporate has its thing. You get to fly some nicer, bigger equipment, whatever. It's all cool, and I get that. But flight instruction to me is the one job where you grab the keys to a helicopter. You have a bit of a plan, but it's a rough plan, right? And maybe you're doing advanced autos or advanced emergency procedures from 9 to 11. And then the next block, you're flying off airports. And then the next block, you're doing this and you're doing that. It's just like one of those it's that one job in our industry where you're continually being fresh on EPs and emergencies. And B, it gives you kind of this freedom. And so I think it's pretty cool. And I think it's special that you were able to find a way to make it a full-time career. And I think that guys like me and all the other Robinson pilots that have gotten to fly with you are probably pretty thankful for that. As far as advanced maneuvers, what's the protocol these days? Are a lot of flight schools starting to try to push in doing more advanced kind of maneuvers? Or is it still pretty specialized, like guys like you?
It's a good question. I think that some flight schools do try to do more of the enhanced auto rotations, but I think it's still something that's very, very specialized. A lot of instructors, as you know, that 200-hour to about 1,000-hour pilots. So they get 1,000 hours, they can't wait to get out and go and do something else in the industry. So it's sad, actually, because just when they're starting to become good at what they do, they end up bailing on instruction to go and fly, like you said, the bigger machines. So I think it is still quite specialized. I think there's also, if you are a low time instructor, there is risk to it. One of the things that we're trying to do at the factory, and there's the new chief instructor now, Guillaume. He's really trying to simplify things for the new instructors, make it so that they can teach enhanced auto rotations, but in a safer way. If you look at SFAR 73, for example, and this has happened quite a few times where you're supposed to get SFAR 73 training before you go solo. And part of that is supposed to be doing enhanced auto rotations. And we have guys that come through the factory that are private pilots, sometimes even commercial pilots, and they have no clue what an enhanced auto rotation is. And so we realize that there are instructors out there that are sort of struggling to teach this stuff. And so we're trying to simplify it now so that as a low time instructor, you can teach an enhanced auto rotation, whether it be airspeed control, directional control, to comply with that SFAR 73 endorsement before you go solo, but in a way that's not dangerous. So it's enhanced, but it's simplified.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've always looked at everything I do in life, especially flying helicopters, as a crawl, walk, run. Now, I was very fortunate at Hillsborough. And by the way, I always thought that was funny because we would always say, like, what is an advanced auto rotation? And at that time, I can't speak for Hillsborough now. I am repping their shirt right now, though. So shout out to Hillsborough Heli Academy, and thank you for your sponsorship of the show. But so I can't speak to now, but I think back in the day, I don't know if they created the language or we just had our own idea, but I think we all kind of said like advanced auto rotations to us was like, dragging the RPMs down a little bit, enhancing airspeed, and doing a max glide, something like that. And that's kind of where we constituted it. Now, that being said, as a student, I could tell that my instructor was scared to teach me that. So that made me scared to do it. And then as a flight instructor, especially until I was probably about 750 hours into instructing, I really wanted nothing to do with any other auto rotation except a straight in, a 90 degree, or a 180. That was kind of like where I felt comfortable. And then I got lucky because I ended up then becoming into the kind of the management side of that of the flight school that I went to, which was also Hillsborough. And I started teaching CFI training, and I did that for like 3 years. And that exponentially made me much more advanced at autos, right? Because we had to do the best glide and the max distance. And I was doing things in the pattern of like, hey, make the spot. That's why I felt so weird flying with you. I was such garbage. But back in my heyday, Simon, I promise I was good. So I got so proficient. But yeah, I think you're right. So, I mean, like for you're flying with probably now lower time instructors. How are you introducing things to help them simplify some of these advanced maneuvers so it can be safer in the cockpit for them and their student?
We know you love helicopters. That's why you're here. But are you ready to make it a career? Hillsborough Heli Academy has been making dreams of flying helicopters come true since 1980. Visit us at flyhaa.com and dream big.
Two main things I think we're really focusing on, which is very, very different from when I was taught. I learned to fly helicopters 30 years ago. And my original instructor, who was a great instructor, great pilot, but he was also quite low time himself. And so I was taught in an R22. I was taught to enter an auto rotation over a runway at 500 feet. And it was enter, airspeed RPM target, airspeed RPM target. And it's this very quick airspeed RPM target. And then before you know it, it's flare, 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 flare. Okay, I'm going to put the power on. And it happened so quickly. I remember the first time I did it, just kind of amazed, like, what just happened? I have no clue about what just happened. So we're trying to just stop that. So now, introduction to auto rotation, first and foremost, it's not at 500 feet over a runway. We take people up to 1,500 feet, 2,000 feet. Enter the auto rotation, get it set up for them, let them see how the aircraft glides. That's the first part of it. The second part of it is there's a lot of chasing built in to the way people teach. One of the big examples of what I just said when you talk about airspeed RPM target is 2/3 of the time that puts your head in the cockpit, airspeed and RPM. So now you're drawing the student into the cockpit, looking at instruments, and of course they just start to chase. So one of the other ways of simplifying it is saying, look, you don't set your airspeed at 70 knots in a 44 by looking at the airspeed indicator. Your airspeed is set by the attitude of the helicopter. So look outside, get the attitude set at a 70 knot attitude. That's going to give you 70 knots on the RPM. We don't want to chase the collective. We know we're going to need a little collective pitch in there to control those RPMs. So we teach them how much collective they need to pull in from the beginning, put it in there, set it, leave it. That'll stabilize the RPMs. The RPMs go up and down a little bit, don't chase it. You're just making more work for yourself. So by going up to a higher altitude, by getting them to set attitude, by getting them to set collective, and by getting them to let them see that the aircraft then will just fly on its own, you just have to hold that attitude. It just takes everything that was rushed out of that auto rotation away. It slows everything down and it simplifies it. And if they set it up and the RPM's a little high, you're like, okay, you can see you're 4% high. Just give me a little extra on the collective and then wait, let it stabilize. When the horn comes on, a lot of people I fly with the factory, the horn comes on, they immediately dump the collective full down. Then the chasing starts again. Like, no, just tap it down a little bit, watch the RPMs, give it a couple of seconds. It will have an impact. It will take effect. Big mistake people make is the horn comes on, they lower the collective, the horn stays on, so they lower it again. If they'd have left it alone after the first one, it would have slowly built itself back up. So introducing that knowledge to the student that, hey, you don't need to rush. If you set it up right, small corrections will take care of everything. And it just takes away the fear of learning how to do an auto rotation.
I think what it is, in my opinion, this is what I always kind of thought, and this is what I deduced over my time of teaching. Now, keep in mind, I haven't been an instructor specifically teaching maneuvers like that for a long time. But this was my interpretation, is that for me as a student, which I had to take in a lot as then becoming an instructor, was the intensity of the maneuver. So I think you build it up in your head, right? Oh God, auto rotation, auto rotation. It's like this big, scary thing. And so much of your training revolves around auto rotation, how close do you have to be on your spot to pass your private and your commercial? And you're always talking about it. Well, then as an instructor, I kind of started realizing like, well, shoot, if you do an auto right from the beginning, it's the easiest maneuver we do. In fact, the hardest maneuver we do is a steep approach. That was my personal opinion. I thought as a student pilot or a low time private, or even still in the commercial, flying a good, consistent, good steep approach was way harder and took way more control coordination than actually flying an auto rotation. And one area that I found is that my students did pretty good in an auto rotation until we would talk about low RPM blade stall. So the way that Hillsboro is set up is like, we wouldn't get to the emergency hazards or the aerodynamic hazards until a little bit later in stage one. So we would actually introduce autos before that, all pretty good. And then you tell them that, oh, by the way, if you have a low RPM blade stall, your blades are going to tool up and you're going to die. Like that's essentially what we would say. And so then you go do autos with them and boom, what happens? Enter the auto, eyes are inside because it's glued to the tack, right? Because I've now just introduced this new fear. And that's what happened to me as a student. I had this unbelievable fear of low RPM blade stall. And it's because I didn't think my instructors did a great job at actually teaching how that's not really going to be a thing, specifically in a practice auto rotation. And it wasn't until just before my commercial check ride, this is a true story, I finally had an instructor that was like, hey man, I think your problem is you're just so fixated inside. Don't worry about being inside. Just take your eyes outside. Take your eyes outside. I had a dream flying auto rotations, kept my eyes outside. Autos were the best autos I ever had. That next day flew, never had an auto issue again until I flew with you. And, and so, no, I was just rusty. And so it was so fun to be able to teach students because I felt like I kind of unlocked, like, okay, I know what the fear is because I know what I was scared of. And you're so right. Like if you're listening to this podcast right now, don't just take it from me, but the fact that literally everything Simon just said is 100% on how I actually taught auto rotations as well. First off, don't introduce auto rotations as a scary thing. Don't slam the collective down so your student's, stomach ends up in their throat. Don't make it this big intensity thing. And yeah, I used to kind of joke around. I'm like, this is like the old rice cooker, right? Like set it and forget it with your collective, eyes outside with your attitude. I mean, I think you could probably agree with me, Simon, but if you enter the auto perfect, eyes outside, a little bit of a pitch pull right off the bat, you could literally do nothing except just sit there until you get to the flare portion, correct?
Yeah. So there's a few different things, or 2 different points on what you were saying there. First of all, if I do a demo flight with somebody, I will take them up in the helicopter, take them around the hill here in Torrance, get them on the hand, flying straight and level, all that kind of stuff. And then when we come back into Torrance, I'll actually put the aircraft into an auto rotation without even telling them. And then once we're in the auto, I'll talk to them and say, hey, we talked on the ground about doing an auto rotation. If you have a look at the tack that I pointed out to you now, you see how the needles are split. We're actually doing an auto rotation right now. And so it's surprising for them, but it also makes them realize, oh, this is it. That's not a big deal. The second thing is when I do primary instruction, which I'll be honest, I don't do a lot of these days, for the very first auto rotation lesson, the student has absolutely no idea what their airspeed is and what their rotor RPM is. The only thing they're taught in the first lesson is where I want their attitude to be, i.e. where is their compass in relation to the horizon, and how much collective pull I want them to do. And we'll spend the entire first lesson setting the attitude, setting the collective. And then on the second lesson, as they've got used to that, I say, okay, now look at that attitude you've been doing. Look what airspeed you've got. See the collective pull you got? Look what. So it takes away that fear of the instruments and that need to chase the instruments right from the very beginning.
It's such a chase, right? Because you enter your auto, if your eyes are inside, your nose follows collective, right? That's what I would always say. And so boom, you start picking up airspeed, and then you look in, you're like, oh crap, I'm 85 knots. So what do? You give aft cyclic, which jumps your RPM up. So then it's just this whole hard game.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, if you're listening to the podcast right now and you're a student pilot, a private pilot, even a commercial pilot, guys like myself, I mean, I was a late bloomer when it came to being decent at auto rotations. If you're feeling like, God, I'm always chasing, I can guarantee it's because you're not entering correctly. You're not keeping your eyes outside.
Absolutely.
Keep your eyes outside. Your airspeed will be fine. Your tack will be fine. Give a little bit of pitch pull. And then I used to actually just ask the student, like, hey, let's do this off feeling, right? You can feel the RPMs coming up, right? You feel that load increasing. Start to get a little light. You might be getting a little slow. RPMs coming down a little bit. And so just play with it, but just know it's also normal, right? If you're a student pilot and you're learning, it's okay to be a little bit scared, right? It's a scary thing. It's something that you could, go wrong, and it could be bad. And so it makes sense. So first off, don't give yourself a hard time if you're struggling with auto rotations, because even guys like myself and even Simon, we all had to learn them too, right? And it was at one point very difficult for us. And I can tell you, then you go off to the industry and you do them once a year and you don't get great training with them, to be honest. And then you go fly with Simon and you haven't done that kind of stuff for 10 years and you feel completely out of water again. So, I mean, it's just one of those things that is just, the auto is interesting. And I think we build it up, and it's actually not that big of a thing, right? And if you just kind of know how to enter correctly and understand that, it just goes so much easier. So if you're listening,
the entry is your foundation.
Oh, yeah, totally. So I was just going to say, like, look, if you're listening to this and your instructor maybe isn't teaching autos this way, talk to them about it. Or if your instructor maybe isn't comfortable expanding into auto rotations, not a problem. They might be a little bit lower time or whatever the situation is. But, find a flight school that you can go do some supplemental training in. Reach out to, Advanced Flight, chat with Simon, and come do 5 or 10 hours, right? It's not like you're cheating on your flight school or you're cheating on your instructor. You're just coming and supplementing, right? I take fish oil. I take probiotics. I supplement some stuff. Even though I live pretty healthily, I still have to supplement. So it's not a bad thing to go and become a little bit more well-rounded. Something I'm curious about, Simon, is you have probably flown with more Robinson pilots than anyone. I could be wrong, but I'm guessing like you're up there. Like if there's a top 3, you have to be in that list. I'm curious to hear some of the common denominators that you've seen over your training career, of whether it's people coming into the factory or people coming into you at advanced. Common denominator of gaps in training? Like, oh man, I'm just consistently seeing this, or I'm seeing that. What is like a consistent negative thing that you see within our industry when it comes to training gaps?
I think overall, because of the inexperience of most instructors, and I say that with great respect because I was a very inexperienced instructor myself when I started out, you get a lot of overworking and over controlling of the helicopter. We kind of touched on it there with the auto rotations, where you really don't need to do as much as people think. And so you get a low time instructor who overworks the helicopter themselves. They pass that on to their student. That student overworks the helicopter, becomes an instructor path. So it's really about trying, as we mentioned with the auto rotation stuff at the factory, trying to get people to stop and just say, look, we don't need to do half of the stuff that you're doing. I think that's the biggest problem, is you need to know the nuance of an aircraft to really fly it easily. And because you're being taught by a guy or girl with 300, 400, 500 hours, you're not able to learn that nuance. So I think that's the thing we're trying to do now, is to get these little details into the industry and get it to, the factory is doing a CFI class now. And so the whole purpose of that is so we can get this next generation of instructors to start teaching their brand new pilots, their private pilots, so that when that private pilot who has now learned to do the auto rotation the easy way becomes an instructor, they're very, very comfortable passing on that simplistic entry and setup to their students. So it's trying to take away that overworking nature of the industry, get people to fly easier, slow down and simplify. That's really what we're trying to do, make it easy. So that's probably the biggest thing as a catch-all statement, is that people just tend to do way more work than they need to when they fly a helicopter.
Work smarter, not harder, right? I think that applies to helicopters as well. And it's easy to talk about, but it is hard in practice, right? I even will sometimes catch myself when I'm in a learning environment and I don't realize it. In my instructor pilot, this could be for an aeromedical job or tours in the canyon, whatever, be like, hey, why are you shaking the stick so much? And it's like, oh shit. I tell people not to shake the stick all the time. What am I doing? I'm shaking the stick, right? And it's going to be weird if people just come in on that part of the episode, by the way. But, it's easy just to be kind of tense in a helicopter. And for me specifically, I don't fly often enough. So it's I get in a helicopter and it's like that first couple hours, I'm just a little bit stiffer and my flying sucks. It literally sucks. And then I loosen up and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do this again. I know what I'm doing. I recently had that, I was flying a 130 back from Toronto down to Reno. And for the first hour or two, I was just tense. And I'm like, oh God, my back hurts, my neck hurts, everything. Ugh. And then once I finally was like, oh, just relax, dude. You know what you're doing. It just completely changed everything. And so I think that's a big thing for student pilots. Now, in the United States, I talk about this on the show a lot. It's kind of this idea of the blind leading the blind. You have brand new instructors. I was really fortunate because being at a big program like Hillsboro, they had it pretty locked down on if you're a brand new instructor, you're not teaching autos for maybe 100 to 200 hours, really. You might go and just be flying with new students and then get some help with the autos and things like that. And then they kind of ease you in. So I felt pretty comfortable on that. Maybe a little bit sooner than 100 hours, really. Maybe it's 25 to 50, but you get what I'm saying. However, in countries like Canada, our neighbors up north, they get their commercial, then they leave, go work in the world, and then come back as instructors. And I'm guessing that you get to fly with people from all over the world because people are coming in to the Mecca of Robinson there in Torrance. Do you see a difference of students that get to fly with high-time instructors versus what you consistently see here with us United Statesers?
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
Yeah. And I think first thing I should say is that it is unfortunately kind of a necessary evil the way it's done in the States. It's just, it's so impossible to get a job with 150 hours when you get a commercial license. So you kind of have to become that instructor. There are some places where if you get 300 hours, you can start flying tours. But most people, that's a lot of flying you got to pay for. So it's kind of one of those things we have to do it. It's the nature of the beast. But you do see that if somebody's gone and got their instruction with somebody who's a higher time instructor, you can clearly see that they've been taught by somebody who wasn't afraid to show them auto rotations, didn't have them overwork the helicopter, was able to understand the low RPM situation, when it's going to be a big concern and when it's just going to be a smooth recovery. So you can clearly see that. But I don't want to knock the way it is in the States, because I do believe it is necessary to do it the way I wouldn't have been able to fly if I couldn't have started teaching in early hours, because I just didn't have the money to buy the 300 hours. And especially if you're going to do 300 hours and fly tours, you probably do it in a 44. So to be able to buy enough hours to have enough time in the 44, it's just prohibitively expensive for most people. So, but yeah, it is nice in places like Canada. They can do that. You can go out with 150, 200 hours and get a commercial job and build that experience. And when you do start teaching, you are somebody that can take that real world experience and bring it to your instruction. So definitely beneficial.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had the fortunate early on, I think I probably ended up about 500 hours. We got a new chief instructor, a guy named Marcus. I've talked about this before, but he went to the industry for like 10, 11 years, and then he came back. And yes, getting to fly with him was incredible. In fact, he came in and changed our entire auto-rotational profile. And it was like a big deal. Everyone was pissed off, except me, because I would fly with him all the time. Like, no, this is way better, And I think it's very similar to a profile that you probably teach. Hillsborough for a long time kind of this weird, kind of low and aggressive swoop, And he really kind of brought in this initial flare, build it, maybe even lower collective a little bit. And it's kind of this progressive flare. And man, that's what I ended up teaching for probably 4 years. And it just made auto rotation so much easier. But that opportunity for me, I think, made me a better pilot, because I got to go and fly with this higher time guy. Now, that being said, there isn't a ton of accidents, not a ton, there's some, but there aren't a ton of accidents training in the United States. And so even though it's a little counterintuitive, it is a system that is currently working. And it's interesting, and I could say the same about Canada, right? You go and you got 150 hours and now you're going to go fly sling load utility in the Canadian bush. Yeah. That also sounds pretty dangerous too. So, it's kind of, they're both kind of an oxymoron, but I don't think there's ever a simple solution to anything. And so I think we just do the best we can.
With the factory right now, one of the things they're doing is they looked at where the accidents were happening in training. I'll give you an example with Vortex Ring State. We found that more people were getting into accidents training for Vortex Ring State than actually getting Vortex Ring State in the real world. So the emphasis now is not so much with the new instructors and having them teach getting into Vortex and getting out of it. We're more teaching prevention, recognizing the onset and starting the recovery before you even really get fully developed Vortex. And so that way, the one issue that we do have with people training with Vortex Ring State, we're trying to take that out of the way and get them to be, again, simplifying everything, right? Making it easier for that low time instructor. So have them teach emphasis on, this is when you're going to get into it. This is what you need to look out for. If you start getting anything like this, just go around, nose forward, start the recovery when you're in any doubt, rather than in the past where we would get people into it, fully develop it. And then if the student made the mistake with a low time instructor, the low time instructor wasn't capable of recovering it. Whereas this way.
What were the mistakes that were happening during that maneuver? And what was the cause? Like, what was the resulting accident?
I think most of the time it's always going to be the student being a little bit nervous and overreacting, putting in too much of the correct pedal, putting in the opposite wrong pedal, nosing over too much. The situation that comes to mind that I was told about where a student wasn't pushing forward enough. So the instructor's like, no, you got to push forward a little bit more. Well, then the student overdoes it. And then now the instructor's trying to pull that nose back as the student starts to freak out. And they also try to pull the nose back, and you get a double effect. So you just got a lot of over controlling that fortunately most of the time didn't actually lead to an accident, but on the odd occasion would. So if we can take that out, take away this need to get out of this fully developed vortex ring state and instead just recover at the onset, it doesn't take as much maneuvering to recover at the onset as it would do if you were fully developed. You can just do a very gentle push forward and fly out of it, get some airspeed, pull in the power. So if you do that, you're not having that student get into the extreme of the maneuver. You're not having the instructor trying to recover from the student's mistake. So that's coming one of the biggest example that comes to mind, just over controlling, overreacting from the student, and then the low time instructor time.
I always thought it was funny to fully engulf into sailing with power. And I'm not really that book smart, but I always had decent street smarts. And I remember early on, actually the first time I attended the safety course and I was in the R22, this is years and years and years ago. I think I remember my instructor pilot, maybe his name was Chris. I don't remember. But anyway, we're over Compton. And I remember Compton because I'm like, oh, Compton. And we do sailing with power, a couple thousand feet, and he fully engulfs it, you know. And man, it actually scared. It was so uncomfortable, just this feeling. And I was a private student still, or just had my private. And that actually startled me with sailing with power. So then when I went into teaching, I'm like, man, I'm getting paid like $15 an hour. Like, there's going to be some things that I'm just not going to necessarily do to the maneuver guide. Yeah. And that was my workaround for sailing with power. I never thought it made sense to actually go and feel it. To me, it always made sense of like, hey, let's feel the onset. And if you happen to put us in it, then we did it wrong. And so I always recovered super early. I never was the type of guy that would pitch us back and then throw a bunch of collective into it and, you know, freaking out. I was like, no, I don't get paid enough. And to this day, I had to do sailing with power recently, actually, when I was doing some recurrent training in a 130. And I'm like, ugh, do I have to do, like, don't put me in it. I don't care. I promise you, I'm not going to land with a tailwind. And if I do, I'll take precautions. I know how to avoid sailing with power. And that's the most important thing. Like, don't put me in this. And so I'm glad to hear that you guys are pushing that, because I think if that comes from guys like you, and then of course the factory supplementing that conversation, I think it's just, we've hit a point to where we don't need to fully engulf in that. Now, when it comes to sailing with power, are you teaching a particular recovery that you prefer? Because I do know that there's the Verschard now. I'm an old school guy. The first time I did the Verschard was with you, actually. So what do you think are the benefits? What do you prefer?
So I think they both have the benefits depending on the situation you find yourself in. You know, if you're coming into a confined area, you've got a building or a tree in front of you and you get into it, obviously doing the lateral and sliding to the side is going to be a lot better than trying to fly forward when you've got a tree or a building in front of you. Having said that, if you're coming into a runway and you get on it and you've got this nice long runway in front of you, it's much better to go forward. So I think from the point of view, which one's best, it really comes down to the circumstances you find yourself in. What we're tending to do right now is if you come through the factory and you've never done the lateral before, we just won't do it with you. We'll just show you the standard traditional nose it forward, keep it simple. Again, focus and emphasis on recognition and recovery rather than getting into it. Now, if an instructor comes through and says that he's teaching the lateral, then my response is, okay, show me how you do it. Because so many people are doing it incorrectly. And so if he does it incorrectly, I'll try and clean them up, and then we'll go back to, but you know what? Maybe for teaching, just stick to going to the traditional forward one.
Just keep it simple, guys. No, and you're right, though. I mean, it's circumstantial, right? It's good to have in your toolbox. I think that if you can be proficient in both, I think one issue with the Verschard technique is exactly that. It's like, you know, he puts out videos. Obviously, it's a technique that works, right? And it's being adapted within the industry. So no, I'm not criticizing that or him. I've got to meet him actually last year. Super cool guy. But I just, it's like one thing to like learn something on YouTube, right? And then try to go and emulate. Or, you know, I know that some flight schools have even doing it in the simulator. But it's like, I don't know. Like, I think you have to go out there and implement it and do it and fly it and do it right. And so I think that that's maybe one of the issues. And I'm sure as it becomes more of a routine, like this is kind of a standard approach and we're teaching both, and, you know, people will get more comfortable with it. But, you know, I just think that there isn't that level yet of people that actually know what they're doing.
Yeah. I get a lot of people ask me, why don't I put more videos on YouTube. And it's for exactly the reason you just said. I don't want to try and go up there and show somebody something, and then some young instructor go out and go, I'm going to try this, and get themselves into trouble. If you want to try stuff like that, get with an experienced instructor. There's going to be somewhere nearby where you can find somebody who's got some time, got some experience. Go fly with them. Do that maneuver with them. So that's one of the reasons why I do tend to avoid putting anything fancy on YouTube. I just don't want somebody to copy it. And I've had incidents where we used to show people at the factory tail rotor failure. And we would say, hey, look, this is not for you as an instructor. This is for you as a commercial pilot, just so you know what's going on. But don't do this with your students. And then within a matter of weeks, somebody went and did it and banged up a helicopter. So we just said, look, we're not doing this because we can't trust people to not try it. So I think that's the thing is if you're going to get this type of training, you have to do it with somebody who's very experienced, and just don't do it yourself. Use it to learn, to understand that if it ever happens to you, now you've got the tools, but don't then go out and try it on your own. That's just a
I've always wondered that mindset, because I'm like the world's biggest scaredy cat, really, when it comes to helicopters. It's true. I'm overly conservative. It's an issue. It's actually my issue of flying helicopters. I'm overly conservative.
That's not always accurate. I think it's good to have that. Sometimes it would be too much, but I think generally I'd rather you be that way than the opposite, you know?
And so it's always been bewildering to me, because I know people like this, where it's like they go and do something once and then it's like their calling card to go and do it again. Or like the guys and gals that would go and during their solo flights as a private student go do auto rotations by themselves. Like, what are you doing? Like,
yeah,
absolutely not. So it's funny. It's too bad, because, honestly, if you could do more training like tail rotor failure or other instances, then, it's good training, good experience. But yeah, you can't, you do that with 10 people, 1 or 2 of those people are probably going to go and try it themselves. And, that's obviously an issue. I want to transition a little bit away from you for a second and talk about the Chariot, in which you have become an expert in. And I'm talking about a Robinson product. Obviously, when I tell non-helicopter people about Robinson, and I kind of play it like, you know how it feels right now, like between the left and the right politically? Well, that's kind of the divide that we have in the industry when you talk about Robinson. And I've been very fortunate this last year and a half to develop a relationship with David there and some of the other executives and some of the marketing team. And Robinson, to me, is on a trajectory that's, man, better watch out, right? I think that Robinson is on something special right now. And here we are on the eve. We're recording this on Wednesday the 5th. This will release later on, but we're here in March, 4 days. Robinson's about to unveil some new products, including a new aircraft. So look, I'm a Robinson fan and I'm a supporter. And I've asked David this same question. What do you tell, what would be your, because arguably you probably have more time in Robinson than really anyone in the world, especially teaching advanced maneuvers.
Teaching for sure. There are definitely pilots out there with more Robinson time than me, but they're commercial operators, pipeline inspectors, things like that. But for an instructional side, yeah,
like
I definitely.
Teaching. And you're a guy that's out there not pushing, I'm not saying pushing the envelope, but you are doing advanced, as your company is called, advanced flight maneuvers, right? You're doing auto rotational profiles. You're doing all these different things. You're zero speed, you're forward, you're backward, you're right, you're left, you're slipping. You're doing it all. And here you are 30 years, you're still doing it. Talk to me about the aircraft. How capable and how comfortable are you with Robinson helicopters?
I have got somewhere over 17,000 hours in helicopters, predominantly in Robinsons, somewhere between 12 and 13,000 in the 44 alone. I've timed out 3-hour 44s. That aircraft has never let me down.
Yeah.
It has never let me down. I've had an engine issue, which I don't equate to the aircraft. That's the engine. But even then, that was not an engine failure. We just had a magneto problem, which led to some buildup of lead deposits in the plugs, where we pulled the plugs and they got the little lead crystals that you see. I had to make an emergency landing with that. But again, everybody walked away, no damage to the aircraft. So again, over 17,000 hours, the aircraft itself has never let me down. There's a lot of haters online that don't like Robinsons. They call the pilots the Robbie Rangers. and they keep pointing to all the accidents. I'm sorry, but if every car on the road was a Honda Accord, then every accident would be a Honda Accord. There's more R44s out there flying than any other aircraft. There's a lot of 22s, a lot of 66s. So they're going to pop up in the accidents. But if you look at the reason for those accidents, it's very, very rare that it's because of the helicopter. It comes down to, unfortunately, it comes down to the pilot. Even when people say, well, it's the weather. Well, the pilot made that decision to fly in that weather. So the helicopter, if you fly it correctly, it's a very safe, very reliable aircraft. And it's a shame that there are so many detractors online, because I do feel that a lot of them have either never flown them, or whether when they flew them, they were a little bit afraid of the aircraft. And there's no need. It's a very, very capable aircraft.
100%. I echo everything that you're saying. I don't have 17,000 hours. So I've always, my claim to fame was like, I got 1,000 hours in the R22 and it was great. You know, that's what I've always said. But I mean that, right? I felt so comfortable in that machine.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that I always tell people that helicopters have limits. Whether you're flying, you know, the H-160 or a R-22, you're going to hit a limit in each helicopter. Now, some of the limits in bigger helicopters are bigger numbers, but I was flying against the limit way more when I was flying bigger helicopters because I was commercially operating them, right? I'm flying air medical.
Right.
I'm flying on hot days in Texas, fully loaded, fully gassed up with a crew and a big patient, right? You think the helicopter is, you know, the 407 in that instance is a rocket ship? It's not. Is it a great helicopter? Absolutely love it. But, right, you're always up against the factors. And I think one of the big issues with Robinson is that it's just one of the things that Frank created was an affordable helicopter.
100%.
And that's the magic of the R44 and the R66 and the R22. But it's also a little bit of the curse, right? There's a blessing and a curse to everything. And you've seen it. I've seen it. I think that there's a lot of people that are very awesome at things on the ground. Maybe they're successful in business, they're entrepreneurs, they're doctors, they're lawyers. And it's actually some of those qualities, oftentimes, most of those qualities don't translate to great pilots. You know, in fact, it translates to horrible pilots and horrible decision makers. And, you know, I think that a lot of those individuals sometimes end up flying in Robinson helicopters.
There's a confidence that comes with being a successful business person. You've created a business, you've sold a lot of whatever it is that you created, and it gives you that confidence of that success. And so when you get into helicopters, there are some people that will take that confidence from their business and think it directly translates to helicopters. It does not at all. It does not. So
the helicopter does not care if you're worth 100 million or if you're worth $100.
Right.
It's going to kill you just as fast, right? So that's what I've always tried to, but I'm always curious to hear from other instructors. Let's say that you have an opportunity, and I'm sure this happens often, to get 5 hours with a student that's just attending the safety course, private owner, which I'm guessing is a majority of people that you see. What is that 5 hours? How can you impact that psychologically, that person, for that 5 hours to maybe help them recognize the magnitude?
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R22 to the R66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Part of the job of being a good instructor is to be able to look at every single student differently and as an individual. You have to look at where they're at, what level they're at as a pilot, what their mentality is as a pilot. And so everybody's a fresh card when they come to me. And then, you know, I'll obviously ask them, how long have you been flying for? How many hours have you got? But then we get in the helicopter and you have to look at, okay, what level is that person at? And then my job is to try and lift them up to the next level. No matter how good they are or no matter how bad they are, is to try and improve them. And a lot of people, when they came to advanced flight, they already had a good attitude. You know, my main job right now is I travel to teach. So I'm constantly jumping on a plane, flying somewhere to a private owner or a small tour company, and I'm giving them recurrency training. Well, if you're smart enough to pick up the phone and call an instructor to get them to come to you, half of my battle is already over because they've already got a good mentality.
Yeah, they've already agreed to have the best.
The problem I have is the guys that don't call. They think, oh, I don't need it. I'll just get my biannual. I'll tell you a funny story, and this is something I've just started doing recently. When I would do biannual checkouts, I would go up and I'd start off with some basic. Okay, let's do some low RPM recovery. Let's do some vortex. Let's shoot some straight-ins. Let's shoot some 180s. And then at the very end of the lesson, as we were flying back to Torrance, I'd do a simulated engine out on the throttle chop. I realized not too long ago that that was not doing them a good service, because it meant that somebody that hadn't done any training for 2 years could come to me and I would ease them into it. So now, and I'm probably giving away the secret, which I shouldn't do. It's the exact opposite.
Yeah, you throw the book at them early.
Throw it in straight away, because if they haven't done training for 2 years, I need them to see just how little they've remembered. So I'll go up there and I'll do a throttle chop on them, and I won't help them. I won't help them unless I absolutely have to. And invariably, you know, they're heading to the wrong area. They've got a bad target picked out. They're doing 40 knots. Their RPMs are down at 90%. And most people are smart enough to look at that and go, oh, I may have struggled if I was alone. And I go, yep. Now, then I go back to the basics. Then I go back to the beginning. But it's a way of trying to tell them once every 2 years, it just isn't enough.
It's a humble pie, you know, and I think it's funny because I think professional pilots get it. You know, I think guys and gals that do it for career understand the importance of continued flight instruction. And we thrive in it, right? Like, we can't get enough. That's one of the things, like, I tell people all the time, like, hey, look, the grass isn't always greener when you go to a big operator. You're going to do an auto rotation once a year with someone that doesn't do autos very often. It's not that great of training, I promise. And so I'm always, and you know, I sell helicopters. That's my primary business. And I work with a lot of private guys and a lot of awesome private owners. I have very fortunate, because I'm picky, right? I get to kind of pick and choose. If there's attitudes or yucky people, I just don't work with them, right? So I get to work with like what I consider to be fairly responsible guys and gals, but they're also, you know, have some attitude, hazardous attitudes. And I spend a lot of time convincing them that specifically once they get their private, man, that's just their license to go and learn more. And there's no need for them to go fly by themselves. I got a friend of mine getting his license, and I'm like, dude, you have a pro pilot that you have on staff. Like, you should fly with that pilot as much as possible. And you guys should go out and practice emergencies, and you should go and do this and do that. Like, to me, it just doesn't make sense. So I really, guys, if you are listening, you're a private owner, you can afford it, right? It's not about affording it at this point. It's about you believing that you need it. Let me tell you, you do. Your family is relying on you, and your kids are relying on you. And the house that you hit when you ball it up is depending on you, right? Like, there's all these things. And so if I could have any platform, any voice, I would just say, go and do recurrent training. It's just so beautiful. I loved flying with Simon. I love flying with anyone new that I can learn something from. And I told Simon, because I was, you know, at that time working on some projects and actually hopefully continuing projects of being able to fly more specifically in Robinson aircraft. Man, first call I'm going to make is going to get Simon on an airplane to come to Bend and whip me in the shape, right? Before I'm doing anything. And I'm a guy that has, you know, arguably more experience than most of my private clients and most private guys. So, you know, I love hearing that from Simon. Yeah. It's so important, guys. You just got to go and do that continual training. And I think I honestly feel this way, that if you stay current, you make good decisions, you follow your gut, then you can fly helicopters for a very long time. Occasionally, the aircraft will have a very bad day and you might have nothing to do about it, and it just happens. But it's, you know, by and large. Now, I do have to ask, the horizontal stab, I got to talk with David about it. That was my first podcast with him. And now actually at VAI, I'm sitting down with him again. I think this is 4 or 5. This guy, like, he should just become a co-host at this point. He's been on the podcast so much. But the first podcast he was on was about the horizontal stabilizer and kind of the engineering and the physics behind this idea of like, oh, by the way, as an industry, we've been kind of wrong, right? And that was huge. I'm so happy that Robinson did that. They essentially did a bit of a recall, and that's great. I think the industry is now safer because of that stabilizer. I mean, I know that we're not out there doing low G, but in your course of flying, are you noticing a difference with that stabilizer?
I'll tell you this, and for anybody that's listening that does have an aircraft that's thinking, do they get it, do they not? 100%, you should get this. This is not me trying to represent Robinson or make them any money. I took delivery of a 66 fairly shortly after they'd come out with it. And I was picking up in El Paso, taking it over to Dallas. And coming out of El Paso, maybe 6,000, 6,500 feet, me on my own, so it's fairly light, even though I had a lot of fuel, started hitting turbulence. And I remember thinking to myself on my own, hey, this just feels better.
Mm-hmm.
This just feels like it's handling it a little nicer. And it does. And that's the 100% the truth of it. That stabilizer in turbulence, it just makes it a little smoother. So it's just a nicer ride. So put the safety aspects of it aside, the low G side of it, it is just a nicer ride when you're going through turbulence. And the 66, as you know, it's a lighter aircraft in many ways because it weighs about the same as a 44, but it's a bigger machine, faster machine. It just makes it so much smoother. And there's a couple of little subtleties when you fly it, but if I don't tell you what they are, you won't even notice. But what you will notice is when you're going through turbulence, it just feels nicer.
Yeah, in fact, when I was there visiting and doing the safety course, I also flew with I think his name was Chris, a test pilot, or not? Yeah, test pilot. And we were flying through the hills there in the LA basin, and it was kind of a windy day. We picked up turbulence, and it did. It felt secure. And then I also kind of had this thought in my head of like, well, when you get into turbulence, and if it's unexpected, that could be a cause of low G, right?
Right.
I would always tell students, I would be like, I don't think people are just going around and just shoving the nose forward. Maybe if you're dodging a bird or something like that. But, you know, by and large, this low G conversation is like turbulence, right? You start hitting turbulence. Hey, let's slow the helicopter down a little bit and let's prepare ourselves for a possible zero G situation and start kind of remembering how I'm going to properly recover from that. And, you know, talking with Chris, talking with David, it's my understanding that if you were to get into a legitimate low G situation, that it dramatically decreases the roll rate, which dramatically decreases the ability to have a mass bump or cut your tail off, whatever it may be. Now, that said, don't go and try it.
Don't do it. No. Because here's the thing. You will still get low G. And this is the thing, what perhaps people don't understand. You will still unload that rotor system. You just won't get the roll.
Yeah.
Now, the nice thing about that is when your nose is pointing down, your natural reaction is to pull back. That was always the problem. When it was rolling to the right, people wanted to roll left. So don't go up and try it because you will unload the rotor system. You will still get low G. So it's just a case of it's much nicer that now people will naturally pull back instead of trying to put in left side.
Yeah. And that's incredible. I think right there is a life-saving modification. I really do.
Yeah.
Low G has been an issue, Robinson specific. I think in the 66, my hypothesis has been people leaving autopilot on too long and just pulling power and the autopilot trying to keep it level. And, you start to get this porpoise. I have zero review on accidents to support that, but it's just a hypothesis I have.
I will tell you.
So I think it's,
sorry, when you fly with the autopilot on, and I tell this to all my students, you still should be covering those controls. You should still, I've seen people put on the autopilot and turn around, try to get a Coke and whatever. No, the autopilot is just to take away the workload, but you're still supposed to be covering those controls because you never know what's going to happen and you need to be there because the autopilot won't always react in the right way. So
I had a HeliCASTS and a 407 disengage, and I was like covering, but I was covering on the right. And it went to the left, and it was dramatic, to say the least.
Yeah.
One of the scariest moments I've ever had in a helicopter. And so, you got to guard the controls. And if you encounter turbulence, right, slow the aircraft down. It's just, you got to slow down. It will be more comfortable. I'm not a big fan of turbulence, so I always slow down. But again, that's because I'm a big scaredy cat, as I mentioned, earlier. But You know,
I'm not saying though.
yeah,
I don't like turbulence at all.
man, it bothers me. In fact, I went to Robinson like a month ago, and we flew on an Epic, which is a super cool plane. It's like a Pilatus, but faster, goes higher. And we hit severe turbulence at coming over the mountains from Reno. And man, whew, I was legitimately not happy. I literally was very scared. My pants had like a little handprint on each side from the sweat marks. So, I just don't like turbulence in an airplane or a helicopter. But Simon, thanks so much for coming on, man. It's so fun to get to know you more.
Thank you.
I'm excited to continue this relationship. I want to do more flying with you. I'm pumped on Robinson. So, I hope that means that I can continue to do some cool things with Robinson and fly their products. Very excited for 4 days from now to see some of this new innovation. Do you know any secrets, Simon?
It's time for your Heli Life giveaway secret word. Listen up and remember this word because you'll need it to enter for a chance to win exclusive Heli Life gear. Ready? This episode's secret word is hover. Visit contests.verticalhelicasts.com to enter the secret word.
No, that I can tell you. I know a few little things, but I can't really disclose it. So,
wow.
But I'll be there next week, so hopefully you and I will get to catch up.
Oh, you will?
Yeah, I'll be there.
You'll be in Dallas?
Yeah, I get in on Monday and I don't leave till Friday or Saturday. So hopefully at some
awesome.
point.
Yeah, love to connect. Yeah, let's make sure we connect, please. Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm telling the industry, man, watch out. I think Robinson is, David seems to be a machine. I don't know. That guy's posting on LinkedIn. He's just like, he's going and going and going. That he's like, I need what he's having. This is my third cup today, and I still don't think I have it. But David seems to be the guy that needs to be at Robinson, and he's surrounded himself with just a supporting cast of awesome people and really industry specific, knowledgeable people. So very excited. Can't wait to see you next week, Simon. Thank you for coming on the Helicopter Podcast. If you are going to the safety course, which I highly recommend, if you're like, what is the safety course? I got you covered. Check out my YouTube channel, and you can check out my R66 safety course that I did about a year ago, and I flew with Simon, actually. The course is awesome. You look at accidents, you talk all about accidents, you dissect the accidents, that Swiss cheese that we always talk about, and those holes aligning. 9 times out of 10, it's like the accident started before the person left their house. And it just kind of keeps multiplying. And so even me, an experienced pilot, to be able to go to that type of training class and talk about those things again, and then see the negative end result is crazy. I even had this kid in our class that had hit a wire, and it was on video. He survived, thank God. I don't know how. You watch the video, and it's borderline terrifying. But again, we're talking about it. We're all learning from it. We're all becoming safer and better pilots. Not to mention the networking is great. I made friends when I was there last year. I made friends that I still talk to like 14 years ago when I went for the first time. And so the safety course is something that you should definitely consider. And if you want to supplement the safety course with some extra action, you got to talk with Simon. So Simon, what's the best way for people to connect with you? I'm guessing that your schedule is a bit of a nightmare sometimes to get on. So how do people need to get in touch with you?
So as you said, I do travel a lot because I do get called out to a lot of different private owners. But when there's a safety course going on, I generally am in Torrance. So they can reach me. If you Google Advanced Flight Torrance, will probably pop up. The webpage is advflt.com, or you can reach me at simon@advflt.com. Any new instructor, this goes out to any new instructor, even if you're not coming to the safety course, I don't care. If you have a question, reach out to me. Don't feel bad about texting me. Texting me is a good way to get a hold of me. My number's online there. You can text me because I'm flying. But I'd rather you reach out and ask me the question than just go, I don't want to bother him and go and do something and get into trouble. So I don't care if you're not coming to fly with Advanced Flight. I don't care if you're not coming to fly at the factory. If you've got a question, if you're in doubt, reach out to me, ask me. I'm happy to help.
Man, that's incredible. You guys listen to that. Seriously, take him up on it. He's literally probably the highest time instructor pilot teaching in Robinson helicopters. And I don't think I'm exaggerating on that. So take them up on that. To our listeners, thank you so much for listening. This is a great episode. I love this kind of episode. I never plan anything. We just get to talk naturally. Like, this is the easiest job in the world. I just get to talk about helicopters and connect with friends and just reinforce friendships. VAI, to me, by the way, is like the place that just makes me realize how much I continue to love the industry, because you get to see all your helicopter nerd friends. And so I'm just so excited. There's lots of good energy right now. Thanks for MHM Publishing, of course, for the Vertical HeliCAST platform. Couldn't do it without you guys. Robinson Helicopters, thank you. You're a sponsor. I appreciate that. Hillsboro Heli Academy. Can't wait to see those guys next week. And of course, to all of our other sponsors, we can't do it without you. And to our listeners, you're the best. Talk to you next time. Simon, thanks again, brother.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Please stay tuned for a final word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
We know you love helicopters. That's why you're here. But are you ready to make it a career? Hillsboro Heli Academy has been making dreams of flying helicopters come true since 1980. Visit us at flyhaa.com and dream big.
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R22 to the R66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.